shortly. So really delighted to host today's session. I guess we've done a few kind of discussions, I guess, early on in lockdown as well, around kind of mental health and how people were feeling, but we really wanted to revisit this as a webinar session. COVID, I think, has, I guess, during this process, in terms of lockdown, in terms of people working from home, managing homeschooling, and even, I guess, as we come out of kind of COVID, that sense of, has it created a sense of fear? Has it affected us all? It's been such a massive topic, I think, mental health, as we've gone through. And we wanted to run this session today looking really at very much at what's the role that social enterprises play in terms of supporting mental health initiatives, and what role might they play moving forward. And I'm really delighted to welcome three speakers to today. I'll introduce the first two now. So first of all, we're going to be joined by Catherine from MHScot Workplace Wellbeing CIC. She's going to be our first speaker for today. And then I'm really delighted that we're also joined by Debs from the Wee Retreat. We're very much hopeful that Deborah Grossman from A Positive Start will also get back onto our session today. And I'll introduce her when she's ready to speak as well. So, as is the usual format, if you've got any questions, any comments as you go through, use the chat, be interactive. Our speakers will be looking at the chat as they go through a little bit, and we'll come to some of that Q&A at the end. Again, if there's anything that was a more personal question, I won't be saying who's asked the questions when we come to the questions at the end. So if there's anything you want to ask, do feel comfortable that you can do that here. We'll just crack on with today's session, because I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone's got to say. So delighted, first of all, to welcome Catherine. So we'll all turn our audio off now, and or our video off, and hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Naomi, and thank you, Social Enterprise Scotland, for inviting me along. I'm just going to share my screen. If you could let me know if you're not able to see that, that would be good.
It's all great, Catherine.
Good, okay, that's brilliant. So, invited along the role of social enterprise in mental health. I think the first thing just to let people know about is about ourselves and kind of our vision and mission. I think when it comes to mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, we know that work for many people provides a sense of purpose, structure, routine, forms part of our identity, where we can use our skills, knowledge and experiences. And all of this is impacted when our emotional and physical well-being is affected. So any challenges to our mental health at work caused not just by work, but any mental health difficulty which is brought to and experienced at work does need to be addressed. And it's important to acknowledge that many people with mental health conditions is not their only health problem. So around 71% of long-term mental health conditions are present alongside other long-term health conditions. So our focus is taking a proactive approach to mental health. Here at MHScot, we talk about protection, prevention and early intervention. But what we do know is that early recognition is not quite where we want it to be. And many people are in significant distress and experiencing great challenges to their mental health. The other issue is kind of what we're about as well, is that there are more, while there are more people at work with mental health conditions than ever before, around 300,000 people in the UK lose their jobs each year that have mental health conditions, and that's at a much higher rate than those with physical health conditions. For those of you who are smaller organisations, we know that many volunteers have experienced of poor mental health, and also volunteers, people volunteer to support and improve their mental health. So when volunteers go into paid employment, often within the sector, they can continue to experience challenges with their mental health. So that's an area that we also work with. It's like everyone that forms part of your workforce, which includes, you know, even contracts, part-time, volunteers, even people just doing projects, short-term projects are involved. So what do we cover that kind of addresses some of this? Well, for us, it's about education, awareness, training, It's about it again ties back to the early intervention and prevention, and that we actually really work alongside any assistance programs, occupational health, counselling, because we're the pre kind of awareness before somebody would use those services. So apart from a lot of what we have here on this slide, apart from the first aid for mental health courses, is actually adapted and tailored for clients' needs and aspirations. And what we're starting to explore with clients is what is their starting point, as this can vary quite considerably. We're now starting to see, from a result of COVID, a larger uptake in developing programs for sustainable change and improvement, which is great. We do know that many people may book or come along to a course, a workshop, and may not actually do a huge amount with it. And that's an area we're keen to address and look at. So obviously we know this can depend on budgets, but we encourage organisations to think about the next 12 to 18 months, and we adjust our offerings based on budgets. And this really should form part of an organisation's strategy and organisational development. And we're also starting to look at how it connects with organisational values as well, and where that fits in there. And then how we make people feel at work. It's a nice quote this, it's used in some of the work we do around emotional well-being and emotional culture. When do we really talk about, how people feel at work? Do we address emotions that are part of our everyday mindset? We bring ourselves to work, but we've got to remember that we also bring a range of emotions, behaviours, perspectives, which are affected by the everyday rhythm and flow of life. And it's unrealistic to expect us to park these at the door. And that is a really important message. I mean, I think when we've delivered workshops and training before, we've had maybe some individuals say that actually I leave all that stuff at home. And I think COVID and everything else has made us all realise that actually we're human. We bring our whole selves to work. And yes, we're there to do our role and our jobs, but what does it mean to be human in the workplace as well as outside the workplace? And then what people are telling us. So a lot of this is also pre-COVID. What we've found is that the current picture where people are finding the main causes of deteriorating mental health has continued throughout COVID, just in a more exacerbated way. So increasing workloads, financial concerns, workplace culture, job insecurity, workplace bullying, external family pressures, hitting deadlines, managing people, external relationship pressures, and also managing clients, customers, and service users. So there's a real mix in there. And what we also, need to appreciate that for many people, they have a lot of these things going on at the same time. And when these things are going on at the same time, that's when we really start to become overwhelmed by all this, and we really, our mental health is significantly impacted. And when we talk about poor mental health, we're not even really so much talking about anybody having a diagnosis, but actually our mental health declining, where we may be at risk of being diagnosed with depression or anxiety, but actually our mental health generally is not good, and we're not functioning well. The pandemic has added additional pressures around fears, a lot of fears and anxieties around losing jobs. As we come kind of slowly out of lockdown, there are fears of being made to go back to work when we don't think it's safe, not being able to switch off. Finances again is still continuing. Being away from colleagues, that social connection has had a significant impact on our mental health. And even not having the resources, things like broadband technology, technical issues, they all again really increase our stress, and children being at home as well has been a key one during lockdown. So if you're wanting to look at any more information around coming out of lockdown and what people are saying, there's a report called Divided Together PDF, and they've done some surveys around what are the concerns that people are having as we come out of lockdown and move into probably a very different environment in the way we need to work. So that's important. The ways of addressing it, so that's kind of where we're kind of structure different things at different levels. I mean, we do know that employers can provide support for all employees to thrive, and more targeted and tailored support for those who may need it. Those that we've come across creating the right environments, and we've come across a few recently who are really championing and have done really, really well actually with this. They've been producing and implementing and communicating mental health at work plans. They've been developing mental health awareness among employees. They've been encouraging open conversations about mental health and the support available when employees are struggling, providing employees with good working conditions, promoting effective people management, and routinely monitoring employee mental health and well-being. And we know that talking about mental health at work can be hard, so sometimes it's easier to start a conversation by focusing on the practical factors that affect our mental health rather than mental health itself. So we can change the context with how we talk about it. So addressing this step by step, again, it goes back to emotions for us. We've started to look much more at the culture and how we want our people to feel and not feel. So as a leader and boards and people in executive positions, they can ask themselves how they want to feel at work, but then they can also ask the following question: how do we want our people to feel at work? And explore that in a wider context, and then explore that in an individual context. We know that stigma stops progress, so any rollout needs to be gradual, genuine, trustworthy, and with good intention. Communicating the why and the value we hold in people in our places of work is absolutely key, and involving everyone as well. And just remembering that employers have a legal duty to protect employees from stress at work by doing a risk assessment if you have more than 5 employees. So there's that kind of legal obligation as well. And then finally, what's often missing? I think we've been running since 2015, and the biggest challenge we face is at the top. And it's the disconnect between employers and employees. So employers need to effectively engage with their employees on this matter. Where employees ask for feedback, this is far more optimistic than the reality for fear of repercussions. Employers can be generally in the dark and maybe rolling out mental well-being policies based on erroneous information. So employers therefore need to reassure their employees of their intentions. And I think it's interesting there that from the experiences and discussions we've had with people, when the leadership are actually modelling and actually talking about their own mental health and well-being, it really does significantly improve and change things. And that would, and certainly for the voluntary sector, include your board members as well being involved in those discussions, because they are a large part of the organisation. And that's a kind of just a whirlwind 10 minutes. I hope I'm not over my time of what we suggest and what's been happening.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was a great introduction to our session today, and I know we'll have a lot of conversation as we bring all of our speakers back in. So I might ask you there's a screen share stopped, and thank you very much. And I'm delighted now to bring in Debs from Wee Retreat. And Debs, I'll just hand straight over to you, and then hopefully we'll be able to be joined by Deborah Crozier once you've finished as well. So over to you, Debs. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you, Naomi. And thank you all for being here this morning and As Catherine said, it's really lovely to be able to speak at these events. So thank you very much for inviting me along. So I have to say, you know, listening to Catherine there, it's what Catherine talked about in terms of the challenges and the place we're in. You know, it's exactly what we're hearing as well with the people that we support. And the Wee Retreat really had to change tact when COVID came along. The Wee Retreat is a wellbeing studio in the south side of Glasgow, and it was set up by a lady called Vicky Kakos, who experienced a mindfulness retreat as a very busy single mum of two working. She was able to escape onto a retreat, and when she came back, she recognized just the impact that it had had on her, and she wanted to create a space that would offer people time out, offer people the time to take care of themselves in whatever shape that looked like. So the centre is there for dropping in for a cup of tea, for attending a wellbeing class, a workshop, training courses. And when COVID came along, obviously closing doors had a massive impact. And so she got quite creative and quite interested in how she could keep continuing to serve communities, supporting communities with their well-being, but behind closed doors, so to speak. And so with that, she was able to set up a few different programs that meant that people not just local to Glasgow could actually start attending things because it was all online. So that was fantastic. And one of the programs that she created was this Wellbeing at Work program, which I now manage. And the Wellbeing at Work program was set up to support people in the workplace. As Catherine mentioned, you know, there is a responsibility for workplaces to look after staff, but it's also about people taking responsibility for their well-being and knowing what to do and when to do it. And so the program that she set up, she spoke to different people, she established what kind of things would be useful, what struggles workplaces were having. And the program that she established is an online tool. So it's a program where organizations, it's a preventative strategy for organizations to be able to support their staff with their physical and mental well-being, but also for those employees to be able to access things when they need it. So there's a range of variety of classes, etc. within the program, some that are available as pre-recorded and they're available 24/7, which means if you work funny hours, if you have crazy home life, crazy work life, you know, if you don't sleep and you need something to help you at 2 in the morning, if the only time you have available is 6 in the morning, there's something there to suit you when you need it. And the classes that she has, the content that she's put on there, also vary in duration and level and variety. So if you've got 5 minutes, that's what you can do. If you've got an hour, that's what you can do. And there's also a weekly live timetable of classes. And some of the organisations that we work with have started using those as part of their weekly activities with the teams. So as part of a team meeting or as a way to socially connect, they've been choosing classes and doing those together. And then we also offer monthly workshops, so wellbeing topics delivered by experts in the field. And we send out monthly newsletters. We support staff with understanding what their needs are through wellbeing check-ins and really helping them to embed wellbeing into their culture. So essentially that is what we are doing within the workplace, supporting organisations to support their staff in a preventative way. And we want to be able to make this accessible as possible. And we also want to educate people in the importance of self-care. So it's part of this proactive, preventative approach. EAPs are fantastic. You know, all these support systems that some organizations have in place are wonderful. But what we'd like to do is support individuals and organizations to have the tools so that that crisis point doesn't come, or when it comes, it's more manageable, or people recognize it much quicker so they can do something about it. And we also want to help reduce the stigmas and barriers to self-care. Self-care is important. We are important as individuals, and it's really necessary to help people to understand that. So that is what our project is. And again, we have worked very much with our community in understanding what the challenges are so that we can best support them. And again, what Catherine mentioned in terms of the struggles that people have, they haven't gone away. They've been exacerbated and new ones have arrived. And I'm not going to repeat everything that Catherine has said. We have found exactly the same issues amongst the people that we're talking with. Additional struggles at home, additional financial struggles, the fear of losing a job, the experience of being furloughed and what does that mean afterwards. And we know from talking to people that the content we're providing and the other organisations that are supporting people with mental health, they're making a difference. And one of our key things is to collaborate with other organisations, because we don't have it all and we don't know it all. But what we can do is work together to make sure that we can best support people in the workplace. We've had some fantastic feedback from people around the benefits. Some people have been using wellbeing tools throughout this time and before that. Some people have found new tools to use. Some people have just, it's almost like a little light bulb has gone off around just taking, 5 minutes to breathe, just sitting in the garden to watch and listen to the birds, just taking a cup of tea and having a quiet space out with everything else going on in the house can be enough during the day to just reset yourself. And I think it's just helping people to understand that well-being comes in many forms, in lots of different times and approaches for different people. No one size fits all. And that's what we're doing in terms of educating and working with organisations, is to help them understand that as well. That alongside the programme, there are practical things organisations can do to help support people. So protected work times, breaks between Zoom meetings. And in fact, one of the reasons I was preparing a presentation yesterday with lots of slides, and this is by no means, this is going to sound like a criticism on slides, and it's not at all. I love a slide, but I just felt that perhaps you might want to sit and close your eyes for part of this presentation, because actually your eyes need a rest sometimes from the screen too. There's so much going on online all the time, and that has an impact on our mental health. It impacts on our capacity to focus and concentrate. So little things that we can do to help people manage their day is what's really important. We talked about, what this mental health space has looked like over the past year and what the upcoming challenges may be. And a few of the conversations I've been having recently, people have been expressing concern around returning to the office. What does that look like? Having to establish new ways of working, new policies around flexible working, managing the anxieties and fears that people have in returning to the office, managing those that are coming back from furlough or that need to be made redundant. How do they support those people being made redundant, but also the staff that are remaining, and their fears and concerns and potentially guilt around, fellow colleagues that have now been in a different situation, in a different environment, are now not in the same place as them. But also knowing how to support their staff. That's one of the key things. They know well-being is important. They know mental health is a really big issue, but they don't really know where to start. And again, it's about supporting businesses, supporting organisations, no matter what size, to help them embed that wellness, that workplace wellness into their culture, into their values, recognising that no one size fits all, and really helping them to engage with staff to make sure that whatever they do put in place is going to be impactful in the best way that it can. And making sure people put time aside to think about it, to implement it, to plan it appropriately, and to have budget for it. It's here to stay. We need to manage this. I think what we're seeing, unfortunately, is just the tip of the iceberg, and we need to be prepared for that. And if we can start now, if we can really work to being proactive in supporting people within the workplace, then that's I think is one of the key things that we need to look at. And if people are already on their wellbeing journey, it's looking at what gaps they have and where they can get support from. So organisations like myself and our lovely other two that are here today, and whoever else is in your community, to support what that well-being is going to look like within your organisation. I feel like I've just rattled through that again, a very brief whistle-stop tour along our role and how we can support people. It is a massive area, and I think that it's lovely that we're all here today to support each other and really look at ways we can work together to enable people to continue to work and continue to be well. So thank you very much, Naomi. Hope that was okay for timing as well.
It was absolutely perfect. And I think I've put a note to both of you. We'll probably end up going straight into Q&A because Deborah's really got it, but she can't get her audio to work. So we're not going to be able to hear from Deborah Crozier today, but we will get her back on in a session in the future because I know this isn't a topic that we won't be touching on again. It's an issue, I think, that is with us for, well, I think it's been with us for a long time, but we shouldn't let its profile drop just because we all go back to normal. I think this is the big danger, I think, that we all have, that we just assume that everything's going to be very quickly okay again. And I think just hearing you speak, Debs, we need to kind of think very carefully about how we prepare for people coming back as well. I've written a few questions. And I'd encourage our attendees today, please put any questions you've got in the chat, any kind of top tips, anything that's kind of concerning you about going back to the workplace or as an employer, if there's anything you're trying to grapple with. We've got a great panel today to really pick brains, and hopefully you've already got some useful tips, but I think there'll be more to come. So I was smiling as you were speaking about some of the things around protecting work time and space between Zoom meetings, and thankfully we weren't doing this session last week where I was literally jumping from one meeting to the next, because I think we'll all recognise that that is something that's happened to a lot of us. I wanted to pick up perhaps on a question, and I'll come to you, Debs, first, and then maybe Catherine. And it's a question around kind of, I guess, for that leadership approach in terms of giving a sense of confidence. Do you think people are sometimes frightened of getting things wrong, that they end up not doing anything at all in this area? And what would be those kind of words of encouragement? You know, my take is always it's probably better to ask for forgiveness for getting things wrong than not doing anything at all. But how do we perhaps get over that hurdle that perhaps people are too frightened about doing the wrong thing, that they end up almost paralysed and doing nothing? What would be your words of advice to them?
I think, and actually, you know, it's one of the things I mentioned before, it's breaking down that stigma, breaking down those barriers to recognising that self-care is hugely important, and mental health is part of that. And I think actually, perhaps one of the positives that have come out of this time is that actually mental health is being talked about by everybody everywhere. And I think actually in some ways it's reducing that stigma in a sort of indirect way, because it's affecting everybody in lots of different ways. And I think that people are recognizing more and more that these conversations need to happen in the workplace. And that it is everybody's responsibility, aside from the legal responsibility, it is. And I think leaders are just people. Leaders are human beings. You know, they're not gods. They're not, they don't have all the answers necessarily. Leaders are good leaders when they can actually say, okay, let's sit down and discuss this. I don't have all the answers, but I know that it's important and we need to take a step. We need to do something about this. And I think that's where the engagement, the collaboration, the modelling, and I know Catherine referenced this as well, it's about everybody getting involved, so that it is something that is the norm. It's not something that only X, Y, Z, you know, get engaged in, because it does impact. And even if you yourself aren't experiencing mental health, there will be somebody that you know who is. And if it's enabling you to support that person in a way, then it's important. So I think, you know, the learning and the and what goes alongside that, it has to help everybody. It has to contribute to everybody's well-being. And I just think just start, have the conversations, bring in somebody. If you don't know where to start, bring someone in that can help you start that conversation and help you put a plan in place. I think that answered your question. I'm not sure. If I missed something, do let me know.
Yeah, no, thank you. I probably will come back to this point about leadership.
Sure.
I'll just see if Catherine's got any kind of thoughts just before moving on to the next questions. And questions are starting to come through in the chat as well. So, Catherine, just any reflections from you?
Yes, I think it's not a huge amount I could add to Deb's. I mean, I think what's interesting is that we give ourselves as much a hard time as maybe sometimes in the workplace we give others. The other thing that's quite interesting in a workplace context, when you mentioned, you know, getting some of this wrong, or not knowing how to go ahead and do this, I think it does very much tie back that not one single individual alone has the answers. It's around collective ideas. It's about bringing people together who have an interest in this area. And it's about leadership actually putting their hands up and saying, we need help with this. And there are lots of us out there that can help you with that. I think when it comes to stigma, fear, what we do know is that actually it can be quite useful to have an external provider come in to do some of that work, because then it takes away it takes away that maybe some of the suspicion that happens within workplaces when certain areas of the organisation start to say, right, we're going to talk about mental health, we're going to do this, and everybody starts to become really suspicious. It's like, where's this come from? Why are we going to be checked? Are we going to be monitored? And actually, an external provider's coming in can take a completely impartial look at the areas, and actually people can feel a little bit more comfortable in that, reducing that stigma. And reducing stigma is certainly one of the big starting points, but it comes down to individuals and people's own individual stigma around mental health, not just organisational stigma.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? I think maybe sometimes there's that sense of the external provider almost takes away that sense of people being frightened to show a weakness to their employer. And we have to get beyond that, seeing this as a weakness. Actually, if you're able to speak about how you feel, that can be a strength. So how do we open up and almost flip, I think, what we do? And I was interested as we were talking even on the point about leadership. I think what's really, I mean, COVID's been a massive challenge, and there's no doubt it's affected people in extraordinary and very different ways. But I think, even, the fact that we're all seeing each other in our home context. I'm in the spare bedroom. I don't know where Deb's is. Catherine's at home. I actually think we've all started to see each other much more as human beings than just job titles in the last year. And I think there's a real healthiness in that, actually. You can see the dogs in the background or the children come onto the calls, and really starting to understand people's pressures outside of just the workplace has been interesting. And I think, and I don't want to feel like we're hitting a kind of doom and gloom, but, I think we don't talk enough about kind of stress, about maybe overuse of alcohol sometimes in terms of crutches that are there. And, I remember from some of my own leadership training, people had some very honest conversations about what were those kind of things that prop them up or that they used. And it's quite frightening, actually, when you look at some of the stats around stress and anxiety in the workplace can hit people at very different levels of the organisation, because we are all human. So I think it's that really trying to understand and perhaps not being frightened to ask people how they are, not just once. I'm recalling even a story of my partner being in work the other day, and he works in a builder's merchants. It's quite it's a very blokey environment, I guess. But, as someone who suffers from anxiety himself, he recognised it in someone else and asked them twice how they were and got, I'm okay, knew they weren't okay, kind of walked away and left it. And then a few days later went back and went, are you okay? Yeah. Are you sure? Yeah. You're not, are you? Actually, no. And, it was that sense of persistence, but also then not needing to know the details around all of that, but just saying, we're here, we understand, and we'll be with you. You don't need to tell us anything, but almost that kind of we've got you approach. So I think it's, don't be frightened to kind of really ask colleagues how they are, rather than just ask them how they are as well. I don't know if you've got any thoughts and perspectives on that. I'll come to Catherine first and then Deb's, and then there's a few questions about mental health perhaps in the community rather than the workplace we might come to.
Yeah, I mean, check twice is quite a common. I mean, Samaritans certainly recommend that, and other, you know, providers in terms of training, you know, ask twice. I think the thing is that the closed question versus open questions. I think we've been getting into quite a lot of discussions, actually, not specifically mental health, but actually getting to know your colleagues. If you get to know colleagues' norm, and really get to know them, get to know, you don't need to be best friends with them, get to know their likes, their dislikes, how they like to work, their environment they like to work in. Then you get to understand their norm. You then have a much better opportunity to understand when things are starting to change for them and spotting those signs and symptoms. So actually getting to know people is a big part of this, is a huge part. And I think I was really encouraged by one organisation we worked with recently. And this is where we see accessing services potentially as a weakness for leadership. And the boss at this company goes to counselling every Friday. He's very open to the whole company that he does this. And it's not that he's actually struggling with his mental health. He's actually using it as almost like a, not support and supervision, but also like, it's actually his mental health, his chance to have his mental health time with somebody to talk about what mental health means to him. He's functioning perfectly fine at work, but actually mental health is important to him. And counselling is often seen as something we go to when we're at the kind of moderate to severe level of poor mental well-being. Well, actually, people can access any of these services to actually keep themselves well. We tend to focus on these services about, let's go and access them when I'm not well. It's like, no, let's access them, just full stop, and just do it, because it's about maintaining wellness.
What an interesting point. You know, if I'm reflecting and learning on that, because I think we're used to even talking about preventative healthcare when we think of physical healthcare. Why can't we do more preventative medicine and that social prescribing agenda? But we're still talking mental health. Yes, we feel more comfortable talking about it on a level now with physical health, but still not perhaps taking that next step around preventative mental health support. It's always still dealing with an issue rather than preventing. So I think we're still that step behind on physical health. Debs, I can see you're nodding, so I'm sure you've got a perspective on that. And then we'll come into some of the questions just around the community aspects of mental health afterwards.
Sure. Again, I mean, I just second what Catherine has said. It's about, being well is just something we should be able to do all the time, not waiting for something to hit, and giving people the tools and techniques so they don't turn to alcohol, so they don't turn to whatever it is they're turning to when things get too tough. It's I've noticed, myself, I'm drinking way more caffeine than I drank before, and I've recognized that actually I'm tired. Yeah. Drinking another cup of coffee is not going to help me. It's going to make me feel worse in the long run. And it's just having those little, so I know that if I go and do 20 minutes of qigong, or go for a walk outside, or pick up the phone to somebody, or sit in the garden with the dog, I know that that's going to help me because I've been doing that before lockdown. And it's about any of these training sessions, any of the classes, anything that people can offer to support well-being. I feel it should be part of the organization's values and culture, just like we talked about at the beginning, that every year, there are things in place to support people throughout the year. And actually, I was talking to a university professional services yesterday, and they were talking about their academic year and how that works and the different challenges that different people within the organization face and how they all approach them differently. And actually what they were saying was, can they come up with a well-being plan that works with their year? So when there's downtime, when there's this thing happening, when there's that thing happening, can we look at putting things in place that work with the employee's calendar, rather than trying to force them to attend something when their diaries are absolutely chock-a-block and it becomes something else that they then have to worry about and think about. So it's, and again, just getting external help, reduces that, you know, we're telling you to, actually, this is a whole organizational approach, and we want to make sure that we do right by everybody and make it part of every day, not part of, holy heck, I'm having a nightmare of a time. What the heck do I do here? Actually, I know what I can do because I've done that training. I've been to that class. I'm doing my meditation every day and I'm walking the dog, you know. So yeah, I think it's just making it the norm. It's like brushing your teeth, well-being, you know, it's like one of those things. You brush your teeth to keep your teeth clean, you do X, Y, Z to keep you feeling, you know, well inside as well.
Yeah, and it is finding that thing that for you is that little bit of a break, isn't it? And it's different for everyone. Again, you know, I know sometimes when I'm completely overwhelmed with work, actually the best thing I've found to get me past that is to actually take 10 minutes out. And for me, actually, that's always going to play the piano, because it stops me thinking about what's in my head, because you have to be very much in a different space. And it seems almost counterintuitive to when you've got too much to do to take 10 minutes out, but actually it can be the best thing you can do. So I think it's sometimes encouraging people to just think in those slightly different ways as well. I just want to, there's quite a few questions coming in, and it's great that everyone's got kind of thoughts and opinions, and I'm hopeful you've been able to catch a few bits as we've kind of been going through. So questions aren't a surprise. I know you specialise in terms of mental health in the workplace, but just in terms of perhaps, in terms of some of that kind of sense of supporting more community mental health work and the role of social enterprise, and I'm just looking through the questions because there's lots. Do you recommend kind of engaging with communities in a similar way to the ideas you've described in the workplace? What do you think might be slightly different? And is there anything particular around working with young people that you would point people to in terms of resources to look at, or tips that you might have? And I'm conscious you may not know that, but if you do, then that would be great. Catherine first, and then Debs.
Yeah, I mean, that's again interesting points. I mean, I think where my focus came from workplace in particular is because I used to work for a charity that closed down, and this is the challenge with the third sector in particular, called Action on Depression, and all my work was in communities, and younger people and older people. In fact, we ran a young person's campaign, Local Key Feel Crap, for younger people, and I think there are a lot of there's probably quite not that much different in the how. The discussions you'll have in a community setting will be vastly different, but the how will be very similar. The how is again around engagement, engaging communities, bringing communities together. And I think from my previous job working with communities in third sector is actually there's a lot of great organisations doing this already in the community. And how can we bring together, I mean, if you think about things like Health and Mind in Edinburgh, or you think about some of the gardening projects, some of the craft and art projects, you've got Whale Arts, you've Edible Estates, all these community things, you've got walking groups, outdoor groups, you've got bird watching. There's almost something around bringing a lot of these in a collaboration around community mental health and all the different things that people can tap into. But I would say there's very little difference in the engagement part. I think the engagement is your starting point, no matter what you're going to be looking at.
Thank you, Catherine. It's great that you're able to bring that experience from previous work in as well. So thank you very much for that. Debs?
Yeah, I think I agree with Catherine. There are, so within the Wee Retreat, and forgive me, I don't have all the details. I'm quite new to the organisation in terms of knowing everything that they offer, but the Wee Retreat was set up to support communities, and I know that Vicky has started different programmes, and I can probably get that information and send it out if people want. But if you go on to the Wee Retreat, or if you are interested in programmes for specific communities, then it is worth dropping them a line. I know that they have started running various programmes for different people in the community that people can access. And again, as a result of, you know, COVID, that's been made available and people can access those online just now. But I agree, it's about engaging, and it's about making it the norm. And then obviously, you know, the language you use, how you structure it can be, you know, will depend on your audience, and also where it's come from. You know, where has the need been established from, you know, and using that as your engagement, you know, if people are telling you. But I think it's also different. I had one of our facilitators was delivering a session. This is not through us, but just independently to a workplace. And she said it was awful. She said there was people sitting there who clearly didn't want to be there. You know, they were looking at their watches. It was just, you know, not something they were able to engage in at all. And it comes down to engagement. It comes down to everybody recognizing that this is something that's important to understand wherever you are, you know, whatever you're doing. It's not this is for you and you because. And I think it's those barriers that are, you know, necessary to break down to get people engaged.
Yeah, no, it's interesting as you were talking about that kind of sense of some people being uncomfortable. I'm reminded of previous team away days, I guess, have been on in the past where, you know, different exercises are done as the icebreaker, and some people really like them and some people are just sat there going, oh my God. And I guess this is the same in terms of, you know, what's right for one person won't necessarily be right for the next. So it has to have that kind of, I guess, more individual approach. There's a few questions still coming in. So I wanted to pick up on the kind of someone talking about how they're trying to get more people to connect with well-being through kind of outdoor hiking, and I guess that link between the physical exercise that's come through quite a bit. In terms of approaching businesses and getting different organisations to engage and perhaps getting them to look at maybe a budget for supporting employee wellbeing, what's been your experience and what would be your just tips you might share with people around that? And I'll just come to Catherine on that one, and then we might come to some other questions with you, Debs, just so I can get through them all.
Yeah, we've had a number of community outdoor initiatives, adventure organisations get in touch with us, and what we found is that they're often in touch with each other because they're doing very similar kinds of work, so they know of each other, and what they'll do is they'll come together as a group and actually put their budgets together, come together, collaborate, and say, right, okay. We'll do this between, say, 3 different organisations. We'll put various people from those organisations on a course or a workshop or a programme that we can offer. So certainly for a lot of smaller organisations or a lot of organisations that are doing similar work, they can, it's really about them getting in touch with each other and actually working together. I think what's probably got in the way a lot over the last 12 months is time, fitting in the time that to actually get in contact with each other, setting a date, getting together and saying, right, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to look at. People's diaries at the moment are just, I mean, we often do get stuff moved, dates get changed, and it really just shows you how chock-a-block people's diaries, and that's not going to change as we come out of lockdown. It's how are we going to how are we going to encourage organisations to fit this in when they've got so much other stuff they need to be focusing on as well is a real difficulty.
Yeah, and it's making sure it doesn't slip back down an agenda. I guess that was the sense about we don't just want to almost assume everything's back to normal. How do we keep that there? I just wanted to pick up, and this is perhaps a broader point that I might bring you in on, Debs, if that's all right. But someone's saying, obviously there's lots of kind of different therapies, and I think the one that they mentioned was cognitive behavioural therapy, the CBT, in the chat, if people are looking at acronyms. I think I've got it right. Correct me if I'm wrong on my acronyms as well. But, do we sometimes look at things holistically enough in terms of mental health and well-being? So if finance is an issue, I think the point they've put is given finance tends to be a significant anxiety. And I guess we've seen that quite a lot in the last 12 months. Everyone's been in a very different position. Do we make enough links with kind of other issues, or do we just always treat mental health as something that's quite isolated? And what should we be doing? Debbie, or Debs, sorry, I did it.
That's okay.
I gave you permission to call me anything if I accidentally said that, so just don't make it too rude.
That's okay, don't worry. I think again, I think we're now starting to look at mental health more holistically generally. I think people are starting to understand that it's not just one thing. And I think different things help people at different times, and people understand that. And that's definitely the approach we take, is that our programme and the Wee Retreat generally, it's a holistic approach. We recognise that not everybody wants to do one thing. And if you look at the offerings that Catherine listed, just looking at some of the chat that's coming through, people are offering the workshops that we offer. You know, they range from personal finance related to well-being, to eating and mental health, to eye care. You know, there's a whole range of things, because lots of issues, whether they be physical, environmental, workplace-based, family-based, can impact on mental health in positive and negative ways. So it's, I think there is definitely more of an understanding that it isn't just one thing. CBT is fantastic. It has its place, absolutely. But it's not going to help me with my anxieties. You know, that's not what I need. I know that's not what I need. I'd need different things. And everybody, and again, it comes back to educating people around the variety of things that are available that can help you feel better. You know, it doesn't need to be 6 weeks engaged in 6-hour-long sessions of CBT that costs, you know, or, you know, if that's what you need, fantastic, but it doesn't need to be that for everybody.
No, thank you. It's interesting. That almost leads into one of the questions, I guess, that came in a Q&A about how do we actually get lots of the resources and the different support that's available maybe into one place, so we all know what different people are doing. And I was actually messaging Duncan while you were speaking, because we're going to be starting some new sessions soon in our Wednesday series, where we're just going to open them up to Social Enterprise Scotland members around networking and really sharing what they do around themes. And given the chat that's come through today, I'm actually thinking maybe one of the first ones we do is a mental health conversation. So it won't be run as a webinar, it'll be much more a chat that we'll bring together, and we can share that, and we can perhaps start doing that. And the other thought, as I read the comment about bringing all the resources together, is, I don't know if you've seen, we launched a thing called the Corporate Challenge last week. So again, for those social enterprises out there selling kind of mental health support programs into business, we're looking very much at how do we, in the same way that we did our Bi-Social consumer site, we're looking at a B2B site so that we can try and raise some of that visibility. So again, I'd encourage you, if you're not just our speakers, but anyone else that's in the session today, if you have those products and services that other businesses might buy, we can start to have that as one of the, maybe a core theme as well, coming through when we launch our new corporate or B2B kind of Bi-Social website, which will come. So I've also seen there's quite a few, and Catherine, you've put up some really useful links to reports and to books, and I'll leave the chat open a little bit once we close our session today in case people want to look at any of those. I just wanted to finish just with a few final thoughts. What would be, I'm going to ask for kind of top tips, almost seems a crude way to put it, but what would be your real top recommendation, both in terms of to someone as an individual in terms of what they do to help look after their own mental health, and then as an employer and an organisation? So a kind of two-pronged top tip to finish on, and I'll go to Debs and then Catherine.
An organisation, start the conversation now. Get things moving now. Just start. Even if it's just sitting around a table saying, what do we do? Just start those conversations. And individuals and organizations, just honestly breathe. Just check in. Are you actually breathing? More often than not, we sit like this. Energy's blocked. Our posture's all rounded. We've got 50,000 things around our head. Our feet aren't touching the floor. Find your feet. Relax your shoulders, close your eyes, and just take 5 deep breaths. I know it sounds very cliched, but honestly, you know, it works. It works just to refocus and just take a moment. You know, unless it's a life or death situation, it can wait. It can wait for you to get your head around something. And when you create space, things become a lot more manageable, a lot less, you know, a lot less difficult. Might be 10 breaths. I teach kids yoga, and one of the things we do is we blow out candles. So we take a deep breath in and we blow it out. And you've got 10 candles here and you've got another 10 on your toes. You know, you blow out as many candles as you need to just bring yourself back into a space. Find your feet, stand up if you need to, or make sure your feet are flat on the floor so you're connecting. Because otherwise you're just, you know, spaghetti person.
Thank you, Debs. Take time and breathe. What great tips. Catherine?
There's not really much more I can add. I mean, I think what I'm seeing, even you know, as the rules around, you know, potentially meeting up change, what I'm seeing both organisation and individually today, who can you call in your workplace and ask the question, what does mental health mean to you? And call an individual today and say, I'm calling in to see how you're doing. How are things? How you know, how is the last, have a chat about how things are. And actually it's useful to bring some of your own perspective, because the other thing is, there's very few people who can sit there and say that COVID has not been challenging in the last 12 months. We need to give something of ourselves in order for other people to open up to us. So we can say, actually, you know what, these last 12 months, by God, they've been absolutely tough. We've all experienced things within our families. You know, I'm moving house next week. My husband's had health issues, you know, at the end of last year. You know, we talk about ourselves will enable other people to start trust and say, gosh, you know what? Yeah, last week I had my child in such and such, and I was so stressed out. That's it. Normal conversations around what impacts our well-being is just so vital.
No, absolutely. And, you know, we're all human. I think that's the key thing I always take from this. We're all in different situations. We're all human. And we all will have peaks and troughs at different times. Don't be afraid to make those connections with people. Thank you. The chat, I think, and the conversation that I know is going on shows what an incredibly important topic this, I would say, always has been, but seems to have become even more so actually in the last few months. We will pick up, I think, in terms of that, the networking session and the more conversation session that we might run around this rather than just the webinar. So we'll keep you posted on that. But I just want to do a big thank you to Debs and to Catherine for joining us today. We will inevitably run another session on this because we know Deborah's really disappointed that her internet connection just wasn't reliable enough today. There's builders in the office, so we're really gutted not to have heard from Deborah. So this is a session we'll come back to, but for now, thank you so much, Debs and Catherine. Great you were able to join us today, and take care, everyone. Don't be frightened to say how you feel. Thank you very much.